The Bombay High Court has said it will not give a stay on the promoter's diluting stake. The deadline of 31st of December. It has to come down to 20% by then. It has to come down to 15% by March 2020. At the heart of this entire battle is that the preference issue that had been announced in August, is it legal? Is it ethical? Is it in the spirit of the law? Will the new governor take a different stance of what the RBI had said? The case was before the Bombay High Court. I do understand Poonam Sane is joining in. Poonam, we have seen the stock react to the news. It's down by about 3%. Now it's down about 2.5%. Next hearing on Jan 17th. So let's see what happens then. But this much is clear that there will be more confusion because if the preference issue is not going to be acceptable by the RBI, then how will Uday Kotak trim his stake to 20% by the year end?
Well, honestly, Nayantara, we cannot really come. It's too early, rather, for us to come to a conclusion if the preference shares would not be considered by RBI, since now we have the new governor at the helm. So I think that that's my personal opinion, that probably it is too premature to assume this. Having said that, I think with the kind of flashes that we understand, Bombay High Court has stated the case is now adjourned to 17th of December. There seems to be a fair kind of toughness, even if with regards to the flashes that I'm seeing on screen, that the Bombay High Court probably may not be putting any stay in terms of the RBI deadline for Kotak Bank. If what I'm reading is correct and if my interpretation is correct, it would mean that RBI from here on probably is free to decide and take their own decisions with respect to Kotak Bank. Having said that, the entire case again is adjourned. So there needs to be some more clarity on this aspect itself. I guess with my understanding of the entire case, we will now have to see how the RBI under the new governor interprets. Would there be any relaxation in terms of the deadline extension or not? If Bombay High Court is going to be in favor of what the RBI is stating, if that is the final conclusion, then probably we only have to wait and watch out for what RBI's next move would be. Would RBI take any kind of penal action if necessary, or would RBI go ahead and extend the deadline? Because there's also an argument here that the preference shares do not really have voting rights. The entire decision...
Just, if you could just tell us that, say if the deadline is not extended, what happens till then?
If at all the deadline is not extended, Pankaj, then my understanding is that it will again be completely in the realm of RBI. How is RBI going to interpret? Would RBI come down and put any restrictions on Kotak Bank or any penal action on Kotak Bank? Because the deadline is clearly ending on 31st of December. Also, we do have the new governor in place, Pankaj. So it all depends how the new governor also interprets and takes a stance on Kotak Bank matter.
Right. Sriram Subramaniam is now with us, founder and managing editor of InGovern Research Services, joining us from Bangalore. Mr. Subramaniam, thank you so much for taking out time for us. Bombay High Court says no stay on RBI deadline for promoter share norms. What is your first reaction?
No, obviously this is an element of uncertainty for Kotak Bank and its investors. And two is the High Court has held the primacy of RBI as a regulator, and said that since the guidelines were around for a while, I think and RBI as a regulator has a right to make regulations. So I think that's the reason they may not have wandered into the jurisdictional turf of RBI.
So now,
but the bigger question now is going to be, how will the promoter dilute stake by 31st of December if the RBI is not accepting that preference share? Let me pose that question to Mr. T.P. Oswal, who's also joining us. Mr. Oswal, so if the RBI, under the old governor, Urjit Patel, decided that the preference issue is not going to be acceptable, this Bombay High Court is saying 31st December deadline has to stand. Does that mean the onus will now be on the Reserve Bank of India, that how this can be done? We already are at in the third week of December.
Well, the promoter ought to have complied with the RBI directions, and the way they wanted to circumvent by issuing preference shares, it was a clearly not envisaged. So in my opinion, RBI and the High Court is justified in saying that what RBI said is right. And you have to comply with that.
But you know, the reason I'm asking this is that the case that Kotak Mahindra Bank has tried to make in the Bombay High Court is that let the new RBI governor decide. You know, while that may just be a legal strategy, it will be very difficult to believe that a new governor, after soon taking office, will make a U-turn on a case like this. Would I be right in that?
In my opinion, he will not be able to take a U-turn. He will stand by what RBI said it earlier.
Subramaniam, you just heard, legal eagle Mr. Ostwal saying that he doesn't think the new governor will make a U-turn. Individuals are considered, institutions are bigger than individuals. Having said that, will there now be confusion? The entire contention had also been, and a lot of leading experts and even brokerage houses had said that while the letter of law may have been maintained with the preference of issue, it went against the spirit of law. Will Kotak therefore have no choice but look at some other avenue to meet the 31st December deadline, or do you think maybe you will see one of the parties approach the Supreme Court very soon?
No, I think at the very least, or at the very this one, just like it happened with Bandhan Bank, the RBI may put some short-term restrictions on Kotak Bank till it adheres to this guideline. So from that perspective, the guideline will be enforced, but with slightly with a window where the bank can adhere to that guideline and bring down the stake over a period of time, which may be 3 to 6 months. And there may be some immediate restrictions placed on opening of number of branches, etc., etc. And so from that perspective, RBI would definitely, I think, even with the new governor, continue with the rule and may not make a U-turn.
Right. Mr. Oswal, I just wanted to understand one thing, that, 31st of December, of course, is the deadline, as you pointed out, and 17th of Jan is, the next date. So before that, if it is not extended by RBI, then what happens to this ongoing case?
The ongoing case the ongoing case was long before. They ought to have complied. They are now trying to circumvent by issuing preference shares, etc. In other words, they will have to infuse some other investor or equity. They will have to dilute. The whole problem is that the promoter have to dilute their holding, correct? And if they take effective step of diluting the holding, then matter is over. The question is merger of another bank. Question is by which you can dilute your holding by offering shares to the shareholders of other banks. So the automatically promoter's holding is diluted. So something will be required to be done by the promoter.
Right. So Oswald, just continuing with Pankaj's question, what we understand from the flashes is the fact that there is no stay in terms of the RBI deadline of 31st of December, so the bank has to comply with it. But the flashes also mentioned to us that the case has been adjourned to 17th of January. What does this mean? How do you read both these statements? Just wanted more clarity on the same for the benefit of our viewers.
Possibly, indirectly, it will amount to complying up to 17th of January, indirectly. In the court hears the matter, though the stay has not been granted, but then the prayer will be made that, okay, allow us to effective steps to be taken. Doesn't mean that steps are completed before that day. You take a steps, but for example, announce something, step is taken, and then thereafter compliance will be as per the law.
Okay, you mean to say is that December, indirectly the bank is getting time till till January of 17th in order to make any remedial steps. Is that the right interpretation, at least as of now?
Right.
Okay. So in Bandhan Bank's case, what we understood is that there were restrictions in terms the remuneration of the MD CEO was freezed, as well as there were restrictions in terms of branch expansion. So I guess RBI does take its view on a case-to-case basis. Do you think that if at all RBI becomes slightly more stricter, what are the other type of restrictions possibly that RBI could put on Kotak Bank? Because with all the options that we have seen so far, it is very clear to understand that maybe in order to comply with RBI norms, in the spirit of what RBI is stating, Kotak Bank will certainly need some more time.
I entirely agree, but then the RBI, possibly the Kotak Bank, will have to give a roadmap as to promoters of the Kotak Bank, as to how they are going to comply with and the steps which they are going to take it. If the roadmap is given and RBI reconsiders this matter, then everything is resolved. But the question is what stand you have taken, and you have went to the High Court. That was not correct, it is justified. So therefore you will have to give a roadmap and ask for a waiver, again a new prayer, saying that please allow us to complete this in this much time, because this much time will be required. If I take some steps, for example, I want to issue fresh shares to new shareholders or existing shareholders without promoters, then possible, and the dilution can take place. In that event, you will have to go to the Reserve Bank of India, giving you, this is our roadmap, these are the steps I am taking, I am calling meeting, this, that, everything. And if RBI says fine, it's okay with you. It means the intentions are more important rather than the timeline. If within the timeline, if the intentions are reflected, automatically it will fall in line.
Mr. Oswal, this is going to be the final question, at least from me. We are seeing also incidentally a recovery in the Kotak stock after a knee-jerk reaction, and I would also, if given an opportunity, ask Sriram Subramanian the same. It's a very rare, unprecedented and bold move by Kotak Mahindra Bank to take RBI to the Bombay High Court. Would you think that this could create a precedent with others, especially when you've seen a change in top leadership? For example, another private lender has been at loggerheads with the RBI, Yes Bank. So do you think this could create a trend for that? Mr. Oswal, can you hear me?
Yeah. So take that. Yeah, I mean, it could create a trend, especially if the High Court case were in favor of Kotak Bank. But one needs to wait till the 17th to see what the final ruling of the High Court or the order, whether it holds the primacy of RBI or whether it swings the way of the bank. So from that perspective, it could create a trend. But eventually, see, at the end of the day, the RBI guidelines also kept changing a bit. So I think RBI also needs to do some introspection on laying out guidelines in a consultative and very firm manner, so that all banks take it seriously. It looks like in this case, especially Bandhan Bank and Kotak Bank thought that they could get around these RBI guidelines one way or the other and did not take it seriously at the earliest. And they have been waiting till the last moment to act on it. Even the preference issue that Kotak did was only a couple of months ago. So which is, while they knew that they were trying to, they could have otherwise consulted RBI and got an approval and then issued the preference shares. But they choose to issue the preference shares and then sort of let RBI knock it down. So from that perspective, I am sure other banks who may also be emboldened to challenge High Court. But I guess the tone of the High Court is the RBI as a regulator has its role, and there is a reason for the need for a regulator and the regulations. So it cannot, every regulation cannot be challenged in the courts.
Okay, this is clearly a developing story. The Kotak Mahindra Bank stock is now down 2%. I'd like to thank both of you gentlemen for taking the time out to help us understand this entire battle that is taking place between Kotak and RBI at the Bombay High Court. No stay on the 31st December deadline, but as we heard Mr. Oswal saying, maybe de facto Jan 17, the next hearing is going to be the deadline for Uday Kotak to trim stake to 20%. We still don't know what method that is going to be. We still don't know if legal recourse will also be sought at the Supreme Court.